My brush hovered only inches from Clara's bare collarbone, my hands stiff and numb from the freezing winter drafts. If Arthur Montgomery walked into this gallery right now, he wouldn't just ruin me, he'd ensure I never held a brush again. I would be a ghost in this city before the sun went down. Yet Clara sat perfectly still on the velvet chase, watching me. The air in the private gallery was freezing. A sharp draft crept under the heavy doors. The only sound was the soft scratching of my bristles. It dragged slowly across the rough linen. The rich scent of linseed oil filled the narrow gap between us. Her expensive rose perfume hung in the cold air. My heart hammered against my ribs in the silence. I tried to focus on the wet paint. A tiny pulse was jumping in the delicate hollow of her neck. Her pale skin flushed under my intense gaze. Clara adjusted the strap of her emerald silk dress. The soft green fabric rustled quietly in the quiet room. I wanted to take a step forward. I wanted to close the narrow gap between our bodies. Instead, I forced myself to lean back. I had to maintain the professional boundary. I was just a poor, struggling painter. She was a wealthy queen in a gilded cage. Clara let out a soft, shaky breath. She stood up from the velvet chase. The green silk of her dress pooled around her feet like water. She took 3 slow steps toward my easel. The distance between us was completely gone. She stood so close I could feel the radiating warmth of her skin. It was a sharp contrast to the cold room. My chest felt tight with a sudden, dangerous heat. She reached out. Her fingers were burning hot against my cold, trembling wrist. The sudden touch sent a jolt of electric heat straight to my chest. My breath caught in my throat. She looked up at me with a desperate, wild longing. Her face was pale. She whispered that her marriage was a lie. She said her husband did not care about her. I stepped back, terrified of the ruin waiting for us outside the door. But she held me close, her hands tight on my shoulders, and whispered, "Say you love me anyway." Her green eyes pleaded with me. My eyes swam with sudden hot tears. I wanted to tell her I was already hers, but the fear of Arthur was a heavy anchor. It kept me silent in the dark. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked slowly. Every second felt like borrowed time. The heavy winter rain lashed against the glass skylight of the small art storage room. It was nearly 7 in the evening. The main gallery was completely dark. The wealthy patrons had all gone home. We were trapped together inside this narrow, windowless space. The metal shelves around us were cold. They held stacks of stretched canvases and jars of oil pigment. The old water pipes in the corner clanked and groaned. They released a dry, suffocating heat into the tight room. The only light came from the dim hallway bulb. It slipped through the cracked door. It cast long, dramatic shadows across the dusty floorboards. We were bent over a wooden crate. Our heads were only 6 inches apart. I could hear her shallow, rapid breathing. I could smell the subtle, sweet scent of her rose perfume. The closeness made my skin prickle with heat. Her forearm rested on the wooden crate. I slowly turned my head to look at her. The distance between our faces was less than a foot. I could see the golden flecks in her forest green eyes. Her pupils dilated as she looked at my lips. I asked her if she found safety in this darkness. Clara closed her eyes. Her lower lip caught between her teeth. She told me I must not look at her that way. Her voice was a mere soft whisper. I did not pull back. I wanted to lean closer. I told her that the storm had washed the rest of the world away. I said we were the only 2 people who existed tonight. I begged her to let us forget the rules of her husband's world. Clara gripped the edge of the cold metal shelf. Her knuckles turned white. She was fighting her own desire. She wanted to be close to me. She told me our feelings would ruin us. She reminded me of my career. I knew she was right. I pulled my arm back slowly. I took a step back toward the door. I gave her space. I tried to clear my head. The push and pull kept us frozen in our own silence. The rain continued to fall heavily against the glass. We stood in the shadows. We waited for the storm to break. We were helpless. The silence was a thick, physical weight between our bodies. I could feel the intense heat radiating off her skin. My hand hovered over the cold wood of the crate. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to hold her. But my mind screamed at me to run. We were living on borrowed time in this gallery. Every second felt like a beautiful, dangerous promise. I slowly lowered my hand. Clara took a soft breath. She did not follow me. We stood there in the dark. The cold draft from the floorboards chilled my boots. The heat of her presence kept me warm. It was a sweet, torturous agony. The cold winter wind howled outside the tall studio windows. Inside, the stone fireplace held only a mound of dying gray ash. I sat in my usual wooden chair. I was shivering in my damp coat. My fingers were stiff and numb from the freezing drafts. Clara noticed my discomfort. Her expression softened into something raw. The elegant, untouchable patron's wife was suddenly gone. She walked over to the small table in the corner. She filled her electric kettle with cold water. The high sound of the boiling water filled the quiet room. She poured the steaming water into a white ceramic mug. She added a spoonful of sweet honey. The silver spoon clinked softly against the ceramic. She walked back to me and held the warm mug out. I reached up to take it from her, but I did not grab the handle. Instead, I wrapped both of my hands over her fingers. I encased her cold hands in mine. The sudden touch was electric. A sudden blinding shock ran through my veins. Clara gasped softly. Her forest green eyes widened. A subtle, tired twitch appeared in the corner of her left eye. She did not pull her hands away. She stood frozen before me. I stood up slowly. I used my height to stand over her. I told her that her hands were cold too. She whispered a desperate warning about her husband. She spoke of the scandal that would destroy us. I told her the heavy door was locked. I said we could not keep pretending. She looked down at our joined hands. The warmth of her skin was the only comfort in the cold studio. Clara let out a long, shuddering sigh. She admitted that she was tired of being a perfect trophy. She told me she had spent her life trying to please her family. She said she felt completely hollow inside. The non-romantic truth hung in the air. It was a confession of her own deep, silent exhaustion. I felt a sudden, deep ache in my chest. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to protect her from this coldness. But I knew the boundary was still there. I let go of her hands. I took a slow step back. I sat down in my wooden chair. She pulled her hands to her chest. She looked at me. Her gaze lingered on my paint-stained hands. I saw the silent longing in her eyes. It was not just about desire. It was about needing to be seen by someone real. She looked away. She took a step back toward the window. We were closer than we had ever been. I told her about my own father. I spoke of the debts that kept me painting. I confessed that my art was my only escape from the cold streets. She turned back to me. A soft smile touched her lips. She said she envied my freedom, even if I was poor. She said my heart belonged to me. The silence returned. It was warm and gentle. We had shared our secrets. The storm outside did not matter anymore. The bright, harsh winter sunlight flooded my private studio the next afternoon. It stripped away the cozy shadows of our previous meetings. The double doors to the hallway were propped wide open. The distant chatter of her husband's business associates echoed inside. Clara sat rigidly on the velvet chaise. Her professional armor was fully buckled. I was cleaning the tall glass partition behind my easel. My hands were dry. My shoulders ached from a long day of work. I tried to focus on my painting, but my mind was entirely on her. Suddenly, the business associates left the gallery downstairs. The heavy double doors closed with a soft click. Clara stood up from the chaise and walked toward me. She stood directly opposite me on the other side of the glass. The distance between us was less than 3 inches. I stopped my rag and looked at her. I saw her reflection in the cold glass. Her rich chestnut hair was slightly loose. Her intense forest green eyes were locked on my face. She raised her hand. She pressed her flat palm against the glass. She placed it right over the reflection of my face. I raised my own hand. I pressed my palm against the opposite side of the pane. Our fingers aligned through the cold glass. The physical touch was blocked, but the heat of our gazes was a physical force. My breathing became rapid and shallow. I saw her pupils dilate. I saw a small twitch in her upper lip. She was so close, I could see the warm steam of her breath. It left a soft fog on the glass. The anticipation was an agonizing, sweet torture. I wanted to break the glass. I wanted to feel her skin. She stepped slowly around the partition. My hand hovered just a fraction of an inch from her shoulder. The burning, radiating heat of my palm was a physical force. I wanted to touch her so badly. Our chests were almost touching. I could hear her rapid heartbeat. I leaned down. My lips paused just a hair's breadth from hers. I could feel the warm steam of my breath on her mouth. Suddenly, a sharp, aggressive vibration shattered the quiet. Her cell phone began to slide across the wooden table. The screen flashed with her husband's name. Clara flinched as if she had been struck. She pulled away from me. The cold reality had returned. I took a step back. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The moment was gone. The heavy boundary was back. We had almost crossed the line. But the outside world was always waiting to tear us apart. She picked up the phone with trembling fingers. Her voice was shaking as she answered. I turned back to my canvas. I picked up a dry brush. I needed something to hold. The distance between us felt wider than the ocean. We were trapped in our roles again. I forced myself to walk away. The final week of my painting contract arrived with a cold, relentless rain. The studio was quiet, but the air inside was thick with a tense, suffocating pressure. I was packing my brushes and tubes of paint into my wooden box. I was preparing to leave her husband's gallery for the last time. My work was finished. I had no reason to return to their world. Clara stood by the tall window. She was staring out at the gray city skyline. Her jaw was clenched so tightly a small pulse was jumping in her neck. Suddenly, she turned around. A heavy wood frame slid off my easel. It hit the floorboards with a loud, echoing thud. Clara did not flinch at the sound. She walked directly to me with rapid, desperate strides. I took a step back. My hands were trembling. I reached for my wooden box to maintain the boundary. But Clara did not let me leave. She grabbed my wrist with an intense, unyielding grip. Her hot palm sent a sudden electric jolt straight to my heart. My breath caught in my throat. I looked down at her hand on my arm. The contrast between her expensive emerald silk sleeve and my rough sweater was sharp. She looked directly into my eyes. Her pupils contracted in the dim light of the single candle. She begged me to tell her that I loved her. She told me she did not care about her husband's wealth. She said the massive mansion felt like an empty golden cage. She whispered that her life meant nothing without me. The emotional dam had shattered. The truth was out in the open. It was a beautiful, terrifying confession that could never be taken back. Tears finally spilled over her long lashes. They fell onto my hand. They felt hot against my cold skin. I told her I loved her. I said I had loved her in silence since the first day she walked into my studio. The confession broke the final barrier between us. I let out a ragged, trembling breath. I pulled her flush against my chest. I wrapped my arms around her waist. I buried my face in her shoulder. The risk of ruin was absolute, but in her arms, the fear did not matter anymore. We were together. We stood in the middle of the dark room. We held each other tightly. The rain continued to beat against the window, But we did not feel the chill. The scent of her rose perfume filled my senses. It made me lightheaded with a sudden, intense relief. There was no more hiding, no more lies. We had crossed the line. I held her close. I felt the steady beat of her heart against my palm. Her fingers tangled in my messy dark curls. She whispered that she was finally home. I pressed a soft kiss against her forehead. We had broken the structure of our world. We were ready to face the darkness together. The immediate relief of our confession was a sweet, intense wave. We stood in the center of the massive, quiet studio. We held each other as if we would never let go. The rain continued to fall outside, but the warmth inside our small room was a perfect sanctuary. Her husband's empty gallery sat in the distance, but his rules did not matter anymore. We had broken the boundaries of his empire. Clara sat on the edge of my work table. I stood between her knees. My arm was wrapped securely around her waist. The physical heat between us was a raging fire in the cold afternoon. I reached out. My hand gently cupped her cheek. Her skin was warm and soft against my rough, cold fingers. She leaned her head into my palm. Her eyelids was fluttering closed. I felt a sweet, intense relief wash over my body. We had crossed the line. There was no going back. She told me she had already packed her bags. She said she was ready to leave her husband forever. She whispered that we would go somewhere quiet. Her low, gravelly voice was a beautiful promise that made my heart leap. She said we would leave the city behind. We would build a simple life where no one knew her name. I looked into her forest green eyes. I saw her absolute trust in me. The fear of our uncertain future dissolved. I told her I would follow her anywhere. I said I would protect her from the coldness of the world. We were poor in plans, but rich in devotion. We were ready to face the consequences together. I pulled back slightly to check the entrance of the gallery. I had to ensure we were safe. Clara pulled me down beside her. She wrapped her arms tightly around my neck. I could hear the soft, steady rhythm of her breathing. I buried my face in her chestnut hair. I smelled the sweet rose scent. We shared the warmth in our small sanctuary. We ignored the dark clouds outside. The mansion in the distance looked powerless now. We had escaped the golden cage of her husband's wealth. We were no longer living on borrowed time. Every second of this night was ours to keep. We had found our home in each other. The gold band on her left hand caught the dim light. She slowly slid it off her finger. She let it drop onto the wooden table with a quiet metallic clink. It was a silent, powerful declaration. She was no longer bound to Arthur. She was only bound to me. I held her closer. My heart filled with a quiet, fierce joy. The storm outside was nothing to us now. We were ready to run. The carriage was waiting in the shadows. We stepped out into the cold rain, our hands locked. The next morning arrived with a soft, quiet peace inside our humble new loft. Outside, a gentle spring rain pattered against the glass window of our small, secret sanctuary. The setting was simple. It was far away from the cold, oppressive mansion. Inside, the rustic iron stove crackled softly. It filled the single room with a cozy, dry warmth. I sat on a worn wooden chair by the window. I watched the gray storm clouds slowly drift away. The freezing drafts of the city were gone. They were replaced by a peaceful, radiating heat. I had already found a small job as a carpenter. The work would be hard. My hands would be rougher than they were before. But the modest wages we earned would belong entirely to us. We would be completely free of any demanding patrons. Her wealthy husband would never find us here. His frantic search had already ceased. They had given up their pursuit to avoid a highly public, ruinous scandal. Clara was finally free from her cold, gilded cage of luxury. Clara walked into the warm room. Her rich chestnut hair fell over her shoulders in soft waves. She smiled a real, radiant smile that reached her deep forest green eyes. Her eyes crinkled at the corners as she looked at me with pure, absolute devotion. She sat down on my lap, reducing the distance between us to nothing. She pulled a simple wool blanket over our shoulders. We shared her warmth. She reached out, her hand gently cupped my cheek. Her fingers were warm and soft against my rough skin. I looked into her green eyes. I saw no fear, no guilt, and no secrets. I leaned in, my lips meeting hers in a deep, sweet, slow kiss. It was a kiss of absolute peace. It was the final, perfect destination of our long, dark road. We had left the cold paintings and the lies behind us in the city. I closed my eyes. I felt her strong arms wrap securely around my waist. The memory of our secret meetings slid away into the soft morning rain. I looked at her. My heart was filled with a quiet, endless gratitude. Our love had survived the storm. Thank you for listening to our slow burn story of forbidden love. If you felt the intense tension of our journey, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with your favorite moment from our stolen nights. Your support keeps these stories alive. If you loved this, you will adore our next video. It is about a young chauffeur who falls for his wealthy billionaire boss's daughter. It is another beautiful, heart-wrenching story of forbidden desire and high stakes. Until next time, remember that some boundaries are meant to be broken. Let the rain wash the world away. Find your own sanctuary in the dark. Keep listening to our quiet hearts and stay safe in the storm. Goodbye. My brush hovered only inches from Clara's bare collarbone, my hands stiff and numb from the freezing winter drafts.